a data, mas se chama E-Parlamento.
Alguém começou
vale a pena.
Alguém começou Desculpe, Marcos. Alguém começou a gravar a reunião?
Sim.
Não, eu não fui. Tereza.
Está certo, não tem problema. Não tem problema.
Acho que podemos dar as boas-vindas às pessoas, Marcos.
Ótimo. Ok.
Marcos, só um minuto. Arnoldo, Carlos Jara, Caterine Baudet, Fernando Rosero, Joffre, Renoblés, Rosadélia, por favor, coloquem junto o seu nome, as duas primeiras letras do seu idioma. Por favor, coloquen junto a su nombre las dos primeras letras de su idioma. Gracias. Va en frente, entonces.
Pour les francophones, je vous prie de bien vouloir indiquer au-dessus de votre nom, mais tout simplement FR. Ça se fait en regardant en dessous de la barre en dessous où il y a les participants. Donc, changez votre nom, ou plutôt gardez votre nom et mettez français juste avant.
Okay, we are changing languages from now on. The plenary session will be in English. And we start by welcoming everybody. We have about, how many? More than 35 people already. And we are expecting many more, 42 already, 42. Okay, and we want to welcome, in particular, Ashish Kothari, who represents another international articulation. And Ashish is going to participate in this one. It is the bringing together two global articulations, and that is a tremendous achievement. How much we can cooperate will depend on our mutual understanding. So very welcome, Ashish.
Thank you very much.
Okay. We have an intensive session that is going to be led by Fred.
Good morning, everybody and everyone. So what we are having to do in the program is, in fact, first we are going to present the meta-network of global networks. Then in continuity, to guarantee the continuity with the session which we had on Sunday, which was basically about an attempt to reformulate 20 years later the Pact of the World Social Forum, and this time trying to join the mind and the emotions. And then I'm going to propose to outline the idea of a global citizens parliament, and then Ashish will come in with some comments. That will be the first part. In the second part, we are going to break out in different language rooms. So when you do that, in fact, you can already now look at the icon at the bottom of your screen, and that is where you can choose actually the language which you want to follow. That will be 40 or 50 minutes, and then at the end we will come back to the plenary in English, where people will actually have a summary of the discussions that took place in the various rooms. And so that is basically the program. But now I think we are going to start with the presentation of the Multiconvergência by Marcos.
So un minuto, Marcos, disculpen.
Yes.
Me gustaría aclarar para los que no lo hubieran hecho todavía. Les queremos pedir por favor que cierren sus micrófonos. Estamos compartiendo en la pantalla las indicaciones para quien quiera escuchar la reunión en otro idioma. Al pie de la pantalla van a encontrar un globito, un globo de interpretación donde seleccionar su idioma. Y les pedimos también que se renombren y al comienzo o al final de su nombre coloquen las 2 letras correspondientes a su idioma para hacerlos participar de los grupos por idiomas más adelante. Para renombrarse pueden colocarse encima de su misma foto y en los 3 puntitos seleccionar.
Dots, you can select.
Pedimos a los intérpretes que por favor cierren su relé. Gracias. Eso es todo. Débora, no sé si quiere traducir al portugués. Perdón, un solo comentario más. En caso de que la conexión caiga, nos volvemos a conectar en el mismo link. Desculpe,
Bom dia.
gracias.
Então, se a conexão cair, nós voltamos a nos conectar pelo mesmo link. E pedimos a todos, por favor, e a todas, que coloquem a sua língua no seu nome, nos 3 pontinhos que tem aí na tela. Você coloca na frente ou no final do seu nome, PT de português, para que saibamos encaminhar vocês para a sala onde está havendo a tradução.
Nous tenons à remercier les traducteurs qui vont faire un travail formidable, puisque dans le réseau Multiconvergence, on travaille avec 4 langues en même temps. Donc, encore une fois, on vous demande maintenant d'indiquer juste à côté de votre nom, mettre FR, et puis pour les traductions de l'anglais au français, mais aussi pour les autres langues,
daring to build something so new as a parliament of planetary citizenship. My special role is to welcome you all in the name of this articulation we've called Multiconvergence of Global Networks. And to say a few words about the multiconvergence, in the month of July 2020, a few of us got together by inspiration of Deborah to try to organize and to actually organize a final event of the Dialogues for Humanity Festival of 2020, which usually is local in Lyon, France, and because of the pandemic was virtual. We then had this final meeting of that festival, which was the space where we first launched the proposal of an articulation of global networks, aiming to share especially 2 purposes, 2 goals, but underlying a political strategic goal. The 2 goals are one, that we reinforce each other's agendas, each one of the networks defending and leading some sort of priority theme, and the others getting to know that priority theme and bringing support, participating in the publicity around the theme, and so on. The second would be to take action together, jointly. And that second one was made real when we proposed the sending the Secretary General of the UN a letter with a bold proposal of the UN launching at the Centennial 2045, Centennial of the UN, launching the Assembly of World Peoples with the purpose, and that is the strong point, political strategic point, proposing the planetary citizens to become an actual player in global governance, in democratic global governance, making the presence of civil societies in the spaces where decisions are taken, where peace and war are decided, where the support to nationalists that usually go against the interests of the majority of the world's peoples are also decided. We acknowledged the fact that our world is mainly because of in the world. The fact, for example, that 5 of the countries five countries that are in the Council of Global Security, the Security Council of the UN. How can we expect any peace in these conditions? So our point comes to be, we need a new actor. We need to solve, to find solutions and struggle for the problems that we're living by introducing a new actor who has been marginal to global governance decisions, and that is planetary citizenship. So from then, July onward, we had a number of meetings. This is the 7th meeting. We are here after an event carried on the 24th. Everybody is going to talk about it, especially to people who are not present. And we are going to proceed with this meeting focus on a second element. The first one was the proposal of a pact of conviviality within the multi-convergence. The second one being the proposal of a global parliament of planetary citizenship. And I finish by mentioning a third dimension, which is the letter to the Secretary General, which is now finishing gathering signatures to be sent to the Secretary General with the request I just mentioned. So I turn the word back to Frederic.
Okay, and I will pass it on to Deborah, who will present, in fact, the new sensibility and new ways of doing politics, bringing in kind of different sensibilities. I would also say different energies, and we tried it out on Sunday at work. So please, Deborah.
Boa tarde para quem está do outro lado do mundo. Boa noite. Eu vou falar em português, aproveitando a generosidade dos tradutores, das tradutoras, que são brasileiros. Estão fazendo com que esse evento possa ser compreendido por gente de tantos lugares. Nós tivemos no domingo, nessa programação do Fórum Social Mundial, uma linda reunião, um encontro muito emocionante em torno do que está sendo discutido internamente nesta convergência, nessa multiconvergência de redes globais, acerca de qual é o pacto de convivialidade que nós vamos cumprir entre nós. Qual o pacto que será a base para que nós consigamos agir juntos. Todos e todas que estão aqui provavelmente têm uma longa história de envolvimento, de engajamento político em prol da humanidade, da justiça, da ecologia, de relações mais igualitárias e democráticas entre os cidadãos e as cidadãs da Terra. E nós todos sabemos as grandes dificuldades que têm os movimentos emancipatórios de viverem juntos, de trabalharem juntos, de construírem unidade. E nós identificamos que...
Agora, me desculpe um minuto, por favor. Eu não sei se alguns dos intérpretes podem me confirmar se ainda estão tendo problemas com o relay em português. Algum de vocês pode confirmar? Desculpe, Débora, mas eles estão avisando aqui que estão tendo alguma dificuldade. Talvez algum de vocês pode esclarecer no relay. Bom, vamos continuar. Desculpe, Débora.
Por favor, os brasileiros, os falantes de português, coloquem as línguas, o PT no seu nome, para que possa ser encaminhado e ouvir corretamente, escolham a linguagem para ouvir corretamente a tradução. Bom, continuando, então, nós, internamente, numa comissão de coordenação, uma comissão de conexão entre as 13 redes que fazem parte da multiconvergência, nós começamos a discutir um pacto do convívio entre nós. E chegamos a uma proposta, uma primeira proposta, já bem discutida internamente, mas que precisa ser amplamente discutida. E então, eu vou resumir, porque temos pouco tempo e vamos passar para os grupos, eu vou resumir os 10 pontos em 10 palavras do conteúdo desse pacto, para que vocês tenham uma ideia da pretensão metodológica, da forma de convivermos, para, de fato, conseguirmos construir essa proposta de experimento de um Parlamento da Cidadania Planetária. A primeira palavra é coerência. Espera-se que cada um de nós possa buscar coerência entre o que pensa, o que diz, o que faz e o que sente. E essa coerência vai nos permitir estarmos juntos. Que cada um desenvolva uma atitude
Okay.
Somos todos aprendizes
O teu som está muito... Não estamos te escutando. Acho que a conexão da Débora caiu.
Frederic, maybe you could continue.
Algum outro de nós continuar
Okay, so
a fala dela?
I will take over. I will present our proposal for a Citizens Parliament, and then when Deborah comes back, she will talk after me. And then after Deborah, I will ask Ashish Nandi to comment. Ashish sorry. So, and here as a representative of the Convivialist International, we have published two manifestos. The first one, which first Convivialist Manifesto, which had the subtitle Declaration of Interdependence, and a second one this year, the second manifesto with the subtitle For a Post-Neoliberal World. We work with three principles, three basic normative principles of common naturality, common humanity, and common sociability. Also with a meta principle, which underlies the other three, which is the control of whoopies, the control of excess, whether it be greed, purchase of power, or just ego narcissism. Those principles, of course, that underlie our actions. So, of Convergência, and we have been formulating it, reformulating it, working through it, but I will present the basic idea for you right now. Just start with imagination. Imagine a September morning in 2025 in New York, where for the first time in history, the Global Citizens Parliament takes place. Around 500 parliamentarians gather to discuss and deliberate about the most urgent issues of the day. The parliamentarians have been chosen at random for a limited term, following criteria that make them fully representative of all people and all cultures on Earth. They will listen with an open mind and an open heart. They will learn together and make decisions they believe to be in the best interests of the world. The idea of a new representative body of citizens on a world scale is relatively new. After the Second World War, it was taken up in France by the Citoyens du Monde, and here at the World Social Forum, at the first forum in Porto Alegre, was set up an Alliance 21 to think through the ideas of a parliament of the peoples of the world.
Disculpe, Frederic, disculpe un segundo. Não sei se você mesmo quer traduzir para mim, mas estamos tendo um problema com os intérpretes. Estão me dizendo que não conseguem traduzir do inglês para o português. Alguém está escutando no português? Vocês estiverão escutando?
Sim, estou escutando em português.
Não sei qual é o problema que está... Não estou entendendo, Silvia, o que você está falando para mim, que não conseguem... Não sei qual é o problema.
Estou ouvindo.
Alô, Alicia, no canal de português, quando as pessoas falam em português, a gente ouve, mas a tradução do inglês para o português, no relay, eu não estou... Eu também não estou com a sala. Helena, você está com a sala? Helena, responde aqui para a gente ouvir. Helena.
Estou achando a mesma coisa que a Carminda está falando. A Carminda está falando que é um problema de atualização do Zoom.
Tá
vendo?
Ok. Então, vamos parar aqui. Tudo bem, eu vou ver aqui como resolvemos. Obrigada.
Desculpe.
Alicia, será que uma solução seria eu continuar em português e para os ingleses, os anglófonos, conseguirem na tradução no canal inglês? Isso resolve?
Acho que não resolve, porque eles não conseguem aceder, são os intérpretes que não conseguem aceder às salas de interpretação. Vamos continuar. Vamos continuar. Desculpe, Frederic, desculpe, pessoal.
Então, vamos continuar. Alors, on va continuer. We are going to continue in multiple language, and I hope that the technical problems are being resolved right now.
Yo no tengo problema.
Said,
Habla acá la intérprete Helen. Yo no tengo ningún problema. Yo no tengo ningún problema acá. Está todo perfecto. ¿Ok, Margaret? ¿Ok, Margaret? ¿Ok? Bueno, gracias. Gracias.
Sure.
Agora pode fechar o microfone. Obrigada, Helene. Super.
Okay. One of the problems for the interprets is that they are in their cabins and they have no access to the other languages. So that explains, you know, the cacophony, but it's being resolved. So, but one of the novelties since, let's say, in the last 20 years is actually the rediscovery of the method of sampling. That is selection, aleatory selection based on principles, so that the citizens, let's say, represent or representative of the peoples around the world. So what we basically did is taking up some of those ideas of earlier parliaments, and now we have, which was done by the convergence movement, and within the Multiconvergência, we have actually so as to set up the idea of a prototype, setting up a prototype within the networks so that we can actually experiment how this new of joining participant should be bicameral. It should be formed by two chambers. The first one, which
é a primeira, o propósito.
It would give advice on the themes, on the problematics that, let's say, the parliamentarians, the citizens, which they would discuss through. The second chamber would be the Assembly of Planetary Citizens. It would have a deliberative functions. So basically two chambers, one which is set up by personalities from different parts of the world, which have experience and which therefore have also the capacity and they would come through learning experience. The members of the council would be selected on the basis of their experience and wisdom by the networks themselves through indication, or if you want a more technical description, through co-optation. So who could be the members of this council of wisdoms? You would have representative of ancestral wisdom, that means indigenous populations, artists, academics and intellectuals, spiritual leaders, social innovators, leaders of social movements, and cultural influencers. Also, of course, citizens, parliamentarians. The members of the Assembly of Parliament of Planetary Citizens would be selected, as I said, by random sampling. That means ordinary citizens would be chosen.
Vou ter que interromper de novo, Frederic. Desculpe, hoje estamos tendo alguma dificuldade. Para os intérpretes, se eu ingresso no canal em francês, escuto em inglês. Se eu ingresso no canal em inglês, escuto em francês. Eu acho que tem trocado a língua para a qual estão falando.
Moi, je pense.
Se quisessem conferir, por favor.
Silvia, aclarando, el en de francés, yo no tengo ningún problema, está todo bien para mí, ¿ok?
Pero la gente no te escucha, Hélène. Les francophones n'ont pas de traduction depuis l'anglais.
El problema es que estamos escuchando invertidos. Entonces, si yo entro al canal de inglés, escucho en francés. Si yo entro al canal de francés...
Moi, je n'entends pas l'anglais.
Excusez-moi, Alain. Vamos a continuar a ver. ¿Puedes hablar alguna cosa de nuevo?
Okay, so
Ahora sí, ahora sí.
in order to maintain the continuity, I will, let's say, repeat, in fact, what we are saying. So it's two chambers, one with a council of the wisdoms of the peoples of the earth, which would be mainly set up, let's say, with people with enough wisdom and experience. And let's say those people would be indicated at the first moment by the networks and the movements themselves. Then the second chapter basically the assembly of parliamentarians. In fact, the assembly juries that work quite well, and of to be representative of the diversity in the world. Of course, they should be selected by region, so that all the regions of the world would be represented. And I said regions rather than countries, because we have also to move beyond, let's say, the nation state in one way or another. That, of course, there would be parity of gender, that races and ethnicities would be sufficiently represented so that we can have, let's say, a multicolor rainbow selection. The question of age is also an important one, so that perhaps children could also take place, from which age, or perhaps that they would be represented by the guardians. And of course, the distribution of income is also very important. Because when you think about it, in fact, most of the people, most of the in the world, I mean, are not the 1% and the hyper rich, but are the poor and the low income classes. So of course, we should be sure that they have their voice and they would be represented as well. Now, the proposal which we have for you and which we will discuss in the different language group is basically an attempt to take up again the project which was formulated by the Alliance 21 20 years ago, but we will rework it as an alliance, in fact, 21 for this year. A proposal to set up an experimental democracy. I say experimental democracy a bit with a reference to John Dewey. And what we want to have is basically a bottom-up approach where from the grassroots, from the networks, through, let's say, inter-articulation of the networks, we come up with something like a prototype which would be, you know, basically trying to shift from the academic to the operational and the practical. How can it actually work? And it would be the people from within the networks that would try to set up this first prototype, this first parliament, and also, in fact, so that the movement goes from the local to the global, and then, of course, back to the local. So within the networks, the work would be done, in fact, by indicating, you know, by indicating who could figure in both of the chambers. And of course, they would also set up the representatives. So this is a work of within the networks where we have to articulate how to expand the circle of networks and how, in fact, we could set up this experiment parliament, how we could just work it out. Of course, the first item on the agenda of the networks and of the parliament would precisely be to discuss the format and the specificities of the parliament. So in fact, I mean, what we want is an experimental design where we discuss together first how we can set up the parliament. So then at a later stage, that perhaps in the next years, we can really work this idea out and flesh it out so that who knows, in a couple of years, we would have, for the first time in history, a World Citizens Parliament with deliberative possibilities, and that, in fact, would suggest policy initiatives and would have the moral force to do so because they would represent everybody on Earth. So I now pass the word to Ashish, and thanking you once again, Ashish, for joining us. Please take the floor and say what you have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Frederick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm very honored to be here and to represent the global tapestry of alternatives, and also a global process of trying to bring together 6 or 7 similar networks around the world, which I'll speak about briefly towards the end. I think some of you may have heard my remarks in the opening panel, so I won't dwell on that too much, but basically in terms of the global context within which you're all trying this kind of an exciting initiative, and many global processes are trying to come together, is number one, that context is number one, foremost, the kind of global crises that we are in, with the pandemic being only the latest in a series of global catastrophes that we are facing, whether it's ecological in terms of climate, biodiversity, pollution, and so on, or it's the crises of inequality and continued deprivation of 1 billion or 2 billion people from the basic needs of life, or it's conflict and the increasing, at least in some parts of the world, shift towards more authoritarian, more fascist political regime, and many other such crises. And also, at the same time, the kinds of responses that we are seeing from citizens around the world, both in terms of resistance, the anti-racism movement, the farmers movement going on right now in India, the youth climate justice movements, and many others, along with responses in terms of... I'm sorry, I'm
Здравствуйте. Что я тут делаю вообще? Я не понимаю. Юнас! Алло.
Es posible que estén hackeando. Es altamente posible que estén hackeando. It's possible that hacker, huh?
Yes,
it's possible the
I
action
think
of
you need
hacker.
to mute everybody. Yeah. Thank you. Should I go on?
Desculpem, meninas, se podem estar atentas, estou enviando o pessoal embora com as 2 mãos, não consigo com tudo. Por favor. E ver se você pode se identificar, se não vai ser mandado embora também. Eu estou mandando já. Ok.
Okay, after a bit of entertainment, I think you can continue. We've removed them.
Thank you for that quick action. So in terms of the sort of 2 kinds of responses, the resistance movements and then the movements that are creating constructive alternatives on the ground, whether it's... I think you would have to lock the room.
Sure.
I
Yes,
just left
should I
the
continue?
room. Good job, Alicia.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, the kinds of practical constructive alternatives that are coming up all over the world, whether it's to do with food sovereignty, water, energy, local governance, radical democracy, gender justice, local commons, sort of the self-reliance, all kinds of different alternative movements that are there. I'm sure many of you are part of also. And it seems to us that there is a really desperate need to try and bring together these different movements, right from the very local to the global. And in that sense, I think the World Citizens Parliament is certainly one of the welcome efforts. Coming to some comments on the idea of the parliament, I mean, I think it's absolutely essential that we build platforms for citizens around the world which go beyond, as Frederick, you just mentioned, beyond the nation state. We can't possibly only be talking about internationalism now, because the nation state has shown itself to be good in some ways, but a failure in many other ways, especially a failure in terms of tackling global ecological and social and economic problems. The nation states are too heavily focused on themselves and too much in the competitive spirit globally. So we need platforms of this kind. And in that sense, I would certainly, on behalf of the Global Tapestry, very much welcome this. But I think one of the things that's really important, because Frederick, I think you mentioned that this would be something that would be represented by all peoples on the planet. And if that is the case, then I think we have to very carefully build what does that mean. So for instance, can each indigenous nation or indigenous people be able to nominate its representatives into this? Can each local community be able to do that? Fishing communities, farmer communities, craftspersons, etc. Self-defined collectives and communities, either historically self-defined, or of course also many new self-defined collectives that are coming up in different parts of the world to challenge the currently dominant systems. How exactly would that work is something that I think we have to build very carefully and not rush into it, because the politics of representation, as we know from past experience, can be extremely complex and complicated, and it can make or break an initiative like this. And I heard you say, for instance, and I read also online, that the networks that you have right now would be the first sort of spaces from where these nominations will happen. The question that arises then is, are these networks themselves representative of the different peoples of the earth? And especially, and I think this is the most important part, which you partly referred to, is does this kind of a platform give an opportunity for the most marginalized peoples on earth? First and foremost, not people like us. Many of us on this platform are not the marginalized peoples of the earth. Does it give a platform for the indigenous minorities in countries like India and China, for instance? Does it give a platform for racially discriminated peoples in the US and elsewhere, Brazil, etc.? Does it give a platform for those who are caught between nation state boundaries, which are not, these boundaries are not the making of the peoples who are there, they're the making of colonialism or accidents of history. How do we ensure that? How do we sort of build over the next few years the possibility of these people being adequately, their voice being adequately present in a platform like this? Another, I think, very important phenomenon or factor which we're trying to grapple with in the GTA is, how do we give a place for the rest of nature? How do other species have representation in this kind of a platform or parliament? What does it mean to give chairs or voices or spaces to the rest of nature? The rights of nature movement, the indigenous movements towards according and continuing respect for the rest of nature, for other species, how does that get represented? Who speaks on their behalf? Just like who speaks on behalf of the next generations. So I think trying to figure out these things, these are complex things, but they're possible to figure out. Figuring these sorts of things out would be very, very essential for any of our global platforms. Now, you've deliberately used the word parliament, and then within that as one of the houses, an assembly. And I think it would be important to tease out the difference between the two. A parliament is a very specific form of governance, as we know in history, which is meant to take decisions with regard to all the citizens that come under its purview. An assembly is not necessarily that. An assembly could be something where you collaborate, where you exchange, where you create more information, where you create a platform for advocacy, for collaborative action, for collective visioning, etc., but not necessarily decision-making that affects the constituents of those who are speaking, on whose behalf people are speaking. So I think it's very important for us to try and figure out what is the difference between the two. And if we really mean parliament in terms of decision making, then what does that mean? Who do those decisions apply to? In which case, what is the relationship between, say, a parliament like that and the current nation states and the current United Nations? Do we want a relationship, or are we saying we're thinking of going beyond them and actually envisioning a dissolving of nation state boundaries, in which case a dissolving of the United Nations, at least in its current form? I'm not suggesting we find the answers for all of these right now, but I think these are things that we need to kind of begin to for a longer term vision. Another challenge, what is the local to global relationship? So I think it's very commendable that you've said there'll be random selection of, let's say, nominees or delegates or representatives, whatever we want to call them, to the global parliament. How do we ensure that they are reporting back adequately to the peoples that they are representing? This has been another big problem with regard to normal parliamentary things, that you get members of parliament. Do they ever report back to their constituents? We know that in many parts of the world that does not happen, or it doesn't happen adequately. Is there right to recall? Is there, what are the forums of accountability of these 500 or X number of parliamentarians who are representing the peoples of the earth? And finally, a challenge which I think is absolutely essential right from the beginning to look at is global forums still tend to be dominated by the global north. And by the global north, I don't mean only the geographic north. I also mean people like me, who come from the geographic south, but who have the resources to be on calls like this, or the resources to get to Geneva and speak. How do we actually ensure that the global south is the one that is at the center of this kind of global platform or parliament? Is something that I think, and that's issues of resources, of language, of complexity of language, of is it only the written form, or do we also try and center the oral traditions and oral forms, etc., etc. These are things I think that really need to be worked out. Finally, a couple of last points. I'm sorry I've gone on a bit longer. We have tried, let me just quickly explain the global tapestry of alternatives. The attempt is to try and horizontally weave across the world movements of radical alternatives, grassroots alternatives, or networks of alternatives, to try and collaborate with each other, do collective visioning, become more of a critical mass. And over the last few months, we have now also teamed up with 6 other global processes. This is the Global Dialogue for Systemic Change, the Grassroots to Global Network, the Global Green New Deal, Progressive International, the Beyond Development Working Group, and of course the World Social Forum itself. So it would be great to be able to, we have already, in fact, I was inviting Alain to see if your networks could also be part of this, and then we could be part of what you're doing to try and figure out what would be the interlinkages amongst these. And we have 2 global assemblies scheduled for the 30th. I'll give you details in the chat on that. It would be wonderful if some of you could also come to those assemblies and speak about this initiative, so that other people also get to know, and then we can see what more sharing, collaboration. I haven't said anything very problematic, and maybe added some useful comments to your deliberations. Thank you again for the invitation. Thank you, Frederick and Alain.
Thank you very much, Ashish. It's your questions are also our questions, and we will work them and discuss them through in the breakout rooms. But now I'm going to give the word back to Deborah to see if we have solved the technical problems. And also I would like to ask the persons here in this room if they could use the chat basically to indicate their networks and to leave their email addresses, so that then at a later stage, you know, we can network actually, and we can bring the people in. So Deborah, vou te passar a palavra, você fala e também você abre para a segunda parte nas diferentes salas, tá bom? Obrigado.
Obrigada, Frederica, obrigada a todos. Eu fiz uma síntese do Pacto de Convivência e enviei pelo chat, nas 4 línguas, traduzido rapidamente aqui pelo DeepL, para que a gente ganhe tempo nos grupos, porque na dinâmica da multiconvergência, o mais importante é a partilha nos grupos, em sua própria língua, com calma, com menos pessoas. Então, em síntese, o Pacto de Convivência, ele traz para o ambiente das redes globais um aspecto mais feminino, ou seja, uma política que se preocupa com as emoções, com a expressão das emoções, uma política que se preocupa com a negociação contínua, uma política que cria um espaço de cooperação, de escuta, de boa vontade. Portanto, a ideia de multiconvergência é equilibrar mais as contribuições masculinas e femininas também no ambiente da política, para que a gente possa progredir juntos e juntas de forma mais harmoniosa, menos competitiva, menos racional, de uma racionalidade desconectada com o coração. Então, eu convido vocês, portanto, a todos e a todas, a irmos para os nossos grupos, termos nossos 50 minutos de conversa aprofundada sobre o que foi dito aqui, o Parlamento, e principalmente as 3 perguntas que serão repetidas e explicadas pelos coordenadores de grupo. E eu queria, além de tudo, agradecer enormemente esse trabalho técnico do grupo dos humanistas, do grupo dos convivialistas, dos dialoguistas, de todas essas redes maravilhosas que estão aqui, prestando um serviço inestimável para que nós aprendamos a sermos cidadãs e cidadãos da Terra. Obrigada.
Okay, and so now you will see the technical magic taking over, and you will be dispatched to the different groups, to the different rooms, and there we will have a discussion, taking up some of the questions of Ashish, but also opening it up to other discussions, to other debates, to see, in fact, if this project of us, if it is workable and if it can be operational. And if not, if it just stays one more utopia, then it means that we'll have to work through it more to make it precisely practical, operational, and workable, because I think the time demands it. Alicia, over to you.
Então, eu vou abrir os grupos. Quem puder ingressar pessoalmente, quem puder escolher o grupo, escolha. Quem não, sejam pacientes, eu vou ir enviando cada um de vocês para um grupo que você escolheu segundo a língua que colocou no seu nome.
Alicia, hay todavía los que no pusieron su nombre, como Fernando Rosero de Ecuador.
Sí, alguns conhecemos, não vamos ter problemas. Quem não, depois eu vou continuar perguntando. Então, se quer esclarecer, Frederica, eu vou fazer este negócio, vou começar a mandar todo mundo para os grupos.
Thank you.
Por favor, estão me ouvindo?
Sim, estamos.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
Hello, welcome. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
Hello.
It's a
Nice to
great
meet you,
pleasure to be with you all here.
Yeah, for me it's very, very deep pressure. I have a problem because I know that about this encounter in this time, but I must to leave this encounter. But I want to say you that I am very proud that many people have this kind of encounter, and I offer my participation for another activities. In this moment, I can remain here. Can you understand me? Yeah, I have this little problem because if I have another commitment in this time, but I want to say that it's very proud to meet with you. And if you want, call me in another opportunity. I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
No.
Please leave your email or a way to get in touch with you. And I will take notes of everybody's email to keep in contact and invite you for the next meetings if we can be together again.
Yeah, no problem. I leave.
Okay, so welcome everybody. So what we are going to do right here is basically have an open discussion about the idea of a citizens' parliament, and we will try to direct the debate by orienting you and having some open questions. We have time, we have 40, or I even think we have 50 minutes. So to start, I will ask you to present yourself briefly, just to make sure that the energies are flowing and that we all know who is speaking and from where, as it were. We are quite lucky because we have Alain Caillé, who in fact had the initial idea of this World Citizens Parliament, and we also have Ashish Kotari. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, we could direct this discussion, all three of us, but I think the in fact, to receive the idea and to put it forward. But first, as I said, let's just have a little self-presentation in which people can present themselves just to break the ice and to make sure that we are on the same wavelength. So whoever wants to start.
Sorry, one minute. Thank you very much. I introduce myself. I come from Argentina. I study sociology of motion, and I know this convivialist proposal from many years ago. But in this moment, I can stay here because I must to leave, and I won't express my excuse me. Sorry, because I have another commitment, but only I want to express my pleasure and my honor that many people do this encounter, and say only that you take with my participation in all activities. Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry,
very much.
but I must to leave.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I knew your text. It's nice to see you in person right now. So we have also Alain Caillé. Perhaps you can present yourself. We don't hear you, so I'll have to.
Right. Yes, well, first of all, I must say I'm not fluent in English, but I'm glad to be here because I want to discuss with Ashish, especially, and other people, of course. And well, I'm a sociologist, emeritus teacher at the University of Nanterre. I created a review called Revue du Mos, review of the anti-utilitarian movement in social science. And I tried to launch the Convivialist International. I think that's enough.
Thank you very much. Morgana, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, it was a bit confusing with all the translation problems. I wasn't sure when I was listening to French or English or what have you. I'm based in the Netherlands. I was born in England, so I'm Anglo-Dutch. And I'm working, well, a lot of the time with URI, United Religions Initiative. And in fact, I heard about this, this whole initiative from Salete from Brazil. She's also a URI Global trustee, so we often work together. So she invited me to participate, partly because of being in Europe, and again, it's quite good to have participants from different parts of the world. So I'm interested in how this is unfolding, I think it is quite important that people, especially people involved with grassroots projects, are visible and are also heard. One of the main problems we have, of course, is that many people are not able to. We just heard from somebody, I think from India, who's saying about the fact that many people are not able to connect with internet. So I feel sometimes we have to be the voice for those who can't actually be heard, either because of oppression, that they aren't actually allowed to speak their minds, or the technical problems. So I feel a platform like this needs to be also addressing those who are unable to join us, as has already been spoken about in this meeting. So that's my main concern, that we don't leave anybody behind. This is something that the United Nations are constantly reminding us, don't leave anybody behind. So that's my interest. Thank you.
Odette?
Yes, hello everybody. This is my first participation in the World Social Forum, and I come from a background of activism on environmental issues, but then I realized that indeed working in Israel on the environment is really problematic, in the sense that the most pressing environmental problems are global, and so much of the decisions, the things that happen here are actually coming from, are related to the world political system. And I became what you call not just an international confederalist, but a world federalist. So Ashish said something nice about that nation states, national governments, they do some things good, but they have many limitations, of course. And to me, I think that they would have acted much differently, and it could have been much better if, instead of representing nations, the state, the mechanism of the state, represented humanity. The state, meaning parliament, but also a court system and of a justice system and a government. Because well, I'm getting here to a speech, but so I'll just finish with this: that democracy, like Morgana just spoke about, the need for grassroots and from below, and in democracy, that is the demos, and it is so important. You can't have democracy without those voices. But you also don't have democracy without the kratos, the element of government that belongs to the people, but that with that tool, the people can maintain balance of power, can prevent the powerful, the violent, from oppressing others. So I will stop here, and looking forward to continue the debate.
I will ask Teresa to present herself. She's actually taking notes, and then at the end of this session, she will, she will have a summary of our discussions, and she's going to bring them to the final plenary. Okay, so Teresa, please. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I am Teresa Costa. I am Brazilian from Rio. I am architect and urbanist. And I'm joining the Multiconvergence because of all the questions, the issues they are leading are the issues I have tried to apply during my whole life, but by instinct. These are my principles of my life and what I think we need to amplify to the world. And I really was searching very seriously about my own action, personal action, in a sense of bringing this consensus to our lives, to the world, to nature, to in a whole sense. So I am here working with them in order to give them some support and feeling so happy and proud of what is going on. I think we are in such a moment due to all this world situation that we are in the moment to develop this. There is a lot of power. People have this finally, this sense of urgency. And I think we have to take profit of this power we have in this moment to follow up and go further in this, bringing the voice of the citizenship of the world from all the parts, peoples, nations, cultures, and people that have been out of the microphones, and also uniting with the need of taking care of the ecology, the environment. We need to join now in this moment. We need to take care of all this that has been out of the speeches until now.
Good. Mansi, may I ask you to present yourself quickly, because we need to move to the discussion as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mansi and I'm joining from India. I basically got introduced to World Social Forum through Ashish ji, who's also present here. And in India, I have been working with parliamentarians, and I also run an initiative which sort of works as acts like a watchdog on parliament in the Indian parliament. And I also work to demystify what is happening inside parliament, the laws and policies being made for the benefit of ordinary citizens. So therefore, I am interested in all kinds of parliament related discussions, and that is what brought me here. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to contribute. Thank you.
Very much. Ajal?
Hello, my name is Mahal. I am from the Bay Area, San Francisco. I'm actually still learning and processing. I'm currently a third-year doctoral student at the California Institute of Integral Studies, and my research is looking into the prevention of epistemicide, and I'm still learning about societal fascism, and that is how I got to this conference. Someone sent it via email, and all of these ideas are very unique, and I'm still learning and processing. So thank you for this space, and I will continue to listen and learn.
Thank you, Mahal. May I assume that you all know Ashish, or you want to say a word, Ashish?
I think already introduced, so just go ahead. Maybe just a quick thing that apart from the India national group called Kalpavriksh, which focuses a lot on environment and livelihoods issues. So yeah, thanks.
Okay, wonderful. I myself am Frederick Vandenberg. I'm stationed here in Brazil, in Rio. I'm a sociologist, and I belong both to the international convivialists and also to the Multiconvergência. And I've been described as convergent, multi-convergent convivialist. What I would like to share with you just to get the thing going is, in fact, we have, and to structure it, because in the other rooms, they will have the same questions. I think how we can bring in this spirit of conviviality into basically not that into the networks, and from the networks also into the parliament, which of course means, in fact, that the people who are working, they have to look at themselves as servants. I mean, servants of the people, And how can we bring in this ethic of service? Perhaps we can do it was suggested via the golden rule. So this is basically an attempt to transform the political in something personal, but also something interpersonal, precisely to avoid, if you want, the competition of the old politics, even within the left. And as Deborah said, actually bringing in something like a more feminine touch. I think that is important. And then two other issues which we have to talk about is because we're working on the one hand with a council of the wisdoms of the people of the earth. We assume that they will have the competence, in fact, to decide about the themes, and of course draw a lot of themes. And all of you who are here present have already brought them into the open, which is basically, the grassroots, which is ecology, which is, of course, a resurgence of the extreme right. Those issues are important. And then we also have, of course, the other question, which is very important, which is the question of representativity. I mean, if we put a parliament together, I mean, how can we assure the representativity according to criteria? So I would say the first one, which has to do with kind of more moral, ethical issues, is how can we make sure, in fact, that it is inclusive, that it is dialogical, and that we don't have the competition, which we still too often see in, let's say, old politics. The second one would be the thematic, and the third one would be the representativity. But given that we have Alain, who is present, and Ashish as well, perhaps, perhaps they can, to a certain extent, take over. And let us just start the discussion. Teresa is going to note down what you're saying. And then at the end, she will present our voices in summary to the plenary. That is the procedure. So whoever wants to talk now can talk, and it's a small group, so everybody can go ahead. And I will just pull back, stay back, and in the hope that you won't need me and that everything will be freely flowing.
Well, maybe a few words. I think all the questions raised by Ashish were totally relevant, very complicated, of course. We will have to do, as we will be able to do, to try and answer them, but keeping them always in mind. But maybe the first and the most important question is what Frederick said, is what makes us representative. We try to build this parliament. Of course, we can discuss it very long, but I think the important idea is the fact that the parliament would be bicameral. And I think it's really important, because, of course, all should come from below, but everything cannot come from below. If we want to have a council of the wisdom of the people of the earth, if you like it this way, we have to bring with us very renowned persons, Nobel Prizes, or something like that. And if we had only them, we would not be representative. We also have to have people brought by the networks. And if Global Tapestry and all the global networks Ashish talked about join Multiconvergência, and of course we can bring many other networks. I think, for instance, of ATD, which is a very important one, and which is present in the international convivialist movement, and many others. I think we will really start being representative. But those networks can design people for the assembly, and of course people for the council. But we also have to think about people we want to be in the council. And we have to bring with us very renowned persons. And I think the both are quite important. If we have both, then we will be able to say we are representative. We start embodying more strength, more wisdom, counsel, conscience of humanity. That's the first point I wanted to. And after, of course, we have to do with the networks which are gathered for the time being, which are here. And they have to have in mind all the questions raised by Ashish, and to try to design persons they know, and to organize, if possible, tirage au sort, direct democracy and to permit people who are not in their networks or people who are in their networks, who are not very well-known people, to be represented in the parliament.
Very good. Someone wants to pick up on that?
So maybe I will comment about representativity, that like, why not think really simply, go down to the basics and say, or maybe the initiative already has this and I'm just not aware enough, but if each person on earth had citizenship and a vote, and then there is all the mechanism of parties, organizing in parties where people can basically come together or move between parties, and those mechanisms that work, well, not greatly, but to some extent do work at the national level. And again, like, I think that they would have worked much, much better at the global scale. I think that what we are facing, like part of the problem of the world, is that today, as consumers and as shareholders in the capitalist system, we are represented globally. The corporation that I am buying from, it's like I'm giving them a vote, I'm giving a piece of money that is a piece of sovereignty, that is power, and they then go and pay, and they create a factory, and they employ some people, other people in the other part of the world, and it's a global way of representation. This is why it's so successful. This is why the market systems are so too powerful, and but because their representation system is global, whereas as citizens and as party members, we are all divided to nations by law. And even as union members working in like the laws that allow us to unionize are divided to different, in each state they are different, so we cannot form unions. So it's very easy for me to exploit the workers, to be in solidarity with the people in my country, but together we are exploiting workers in other parts of the world. So saying that we need to have one system of laws and one system of representation, it sounds very big, but then it's also very simple. And then we can basically balance the power of the market, of the big capital and of the big corporation, and their representative powers with the good representation of the people of the earth as citizens, and not as only as consumers or as shareholders or as workers. So I throw this on the table there, and people can.
Thank you. For that, may I ask one of the women to speak next, or even two of them, to make sure that we have parity. Please, Morgana.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm really pleased you mentioned this whole aspect of consumerism, globalism, and the world's kind of platform, income, trading, this whole question of how do we approach what we're actually talking about is now sacred economy. We're trying to look at different ways in which people can actually exchange not only goods, but also know-how and all the rest of it. How this has actually come about is partly also because of the effects of COVID. one of the things that we're working on in 2020 was, I'll give a very, very concrete example, and it is actually from Latin America, from what we called, for Westerners, I know people in Brazil don't like it, but we called it Amazonia, because many people in the West, you can't talk about different sections, but we had a campaign which was actually to support the people in Latin America, especially in the so-called Amazon regions, whether it was the highlands or wetlands or the forests. But one of the things that really came out of, because of this whole kind of disaster, was the fact that many indigenous people were not going to probably die of COVID, but they were going to probably die of starvation, simply because their incomes had dried up, and but they also had the battle, not just against the fact that they had no more income, but also the effects of environmental of pollution, of globalization. So there were so many things, so many factors which were impacting on their lives, and that really brought us, us home to the idea of how do we actually interact with each other. So this brought on many, many aspects. One of the things that we also noticed was that, unfortunately, and this is very much a post-colonial attitude which still exists, is this kind of missionary attitude. And what I mean by that is, when we talk about aid, there is still this idea in many people's minds that we will just give, but not realizing that many, especially Indigenous people, they really find it in some respects offensive, because it's this idea of, we will just give you some money and we will feel very sorry for you, but it doesn't address the fact that they too want to contribute. And one of the things that we saw from our campaign was, one of the things we said to people was, dignity, not charity. And for me, that really encapsulates the whole way we're dealing with things like economy. We're not dealing with many of these problems with dignity. There is still this attitude of, we'll people, we're desperate, so we'll just give them some money and hope that the problem will go away. It doesn't address the real issues of how do we deal with trade. How are we willing to look at different models to create something what we're now calling sacred economy, in which the spiritual component is also important as far as money is concerned? How do we make money become spiritualized? So that these are all questions that I think are very, very important to start addressing. And these are the things that we can really share, because I need to know how do the people in the Amazon areas or in India or Indonesia, how are the indigenous people, the marginalized groups, that conversation, that dialogue really, really needs to be something which we are constantly, it's something I think needs to be there in our uppermost minds. So I'm talking about the spiritual component, spiritual resilience, which we can offer, but also fair trade principles, looking at economy in a very different way. And also, of course, the environmental issues, that we see the earth as a living entity, the rivers, the mountains. We know that there are groups of people, countries like New Zealand are recognizing that sacred rivers are living entities. I think all of these points need to be so much more emphasized, and that we do have this idea of reciprocity. And I think that's so important. And again, combating things like consumerism, combating things like globalism, dignity, not charity. Oh, I can't hear you, Frederick. Hello.
Thank you very much. Can I ask women who hasn't spoken to speak up right now? If not, that's fine as well. And we can just continue. Ashish?
Yeah, sorry. Is there somebody else before me? Somebody who hasn't spoken yet? Okay. Maybe 2 or 3 additional thoughts here. Many of the questions that are being posed or the issues, points that are coming up, very important ones, including the questions I raised, don't necessarily have easy answers. So we'll have to obviously have much more deliberations on them. But I think one very important thing with your first point, Frederick, which is about inclusivity, is the need to build trust. We have seen global processes, global, regional, national processes in the past either thrive because there has been a process of building mutual trust, or collapse because there hasn't been that process. And this is so important when we're trying to build something which is multicultural, where a particular word that I use could be interpreted in 5 different ways depending on which cultural context you're coming from, even if we are all speaking English. And it seems to me, again, and this is the plea I made in the beginning when I spoke, is the need to move carefully, deliberately, and slowly, and not rush. This means many more conversations of this kind with global and regional networks, with the self-identified collectives in different parts of the world, or with networks of self-identified collectives. As an example, there is the Coalition of Indigenous Peoples of the Amazon. There are 2, I think. Now, it would be impossible for us to go to every single individual, indigenous community, but because there is that kind of a pan-Amazonian network, that becomes a very important entity to build the relationship of trust and understanding. And the second part of this is to create a sense of significance. Why would people want to join a global citizens platform of this kind? Is only if they see that in their lives and for their struggles, this has meaning. It is something that they can contribute to, and that can contribute to their own, to the alleviation of their struggles, or to taking their issues further. I think these 2 things are really important. So the messaging, the conversations, the dialogues, all of this over the next X amount of time becomes really important. The second point about representativeness, equally important. I think we all live now, or many of us live lives of multiple identities these days. We have a geographic identity. I think of myself as Indian, whatever that means. But I can also think of myself as part of a global environmental movement, for instance, or part of the global tapestry of alternatives. You can have somebody who is a Mapuche or a Quechua indigenous person from Latin America, but is also part of, let's say, a trade union, a workers' trade union or whatever. So there's multiple identities, and I think we have to kind of also work our way through this. So when we say that people will nominate a representative or a delegate to the global parliament, which collectives are we talking about? Are these geographically located collectives? Are they occupationally identified collectives? Are they some other form of interest group, so to speak, right? Or maybe all of them, so that we actually have this amazing interface between space and place based and interest and occupation based kind of collectives that are that are coming together in that kind of a platform. So again, I'm not suggesting answers. I'm just saying that I think these are some of the things that over time we should carefully work through. And through this number of global processes that we have, I think it should be possible to start these sorts of conversations. For instance, with COECA, that is the Amazonian Assembly, or with global trade unions, which collectively put together a lot of national and local trade unions, or with you already have La Via Campesina in your list. I don't know how active they have been, but so for instance, that as a global platform of small peasants and farmers. There's international net or global networks of fish workers. So I think identifying these sorts of groupings, some of which are already part of our network, some of which are not, and then trying to see how do we build this relationship of trust and significance would be very, very crucial.
Very good. Someone else? Again, as I said, there's perhaps someone of the women who wants to speak first. Otherwise, I'll give pass the word to Alain. But please feel free to talk.
Nobody wanting to speak? No one else. I do agree with Ashish. I think another important question we should examine is a question raised by our friend Gus Massia. He said that we should create, I don't remember the number, I think 11 regional parliaments for Asia, for Africa, for Europe, Latin America, and so on and so on. And of course, he's right. It would be meaningful, but we cannot do everything. It's very complicated. With what should we start? What should we start with? Trying to build a global parliament, and after trying to create regional parliaments, or the other way around. I have no idea. My intuition is that it would be more significant to start trying to build the global one, and after maybe trying to build local or regional parliaments. But it's a question. I have no answer.
Can I come in?
Please do.
So I wanted to also bring up two related points, because usually when you are trying to conceive of an institution like Parliament, you usually try and find its origination, which can be the constitution, for instance, like in India and in many other countries. So perhaps it might also be useful to think of a constitution. I don't know if that is being considered in some other sessions, but perhaps it would be in the constitution where some of these principles of representation and inclusivity that we are discussing could be enshrined, and the structure of the parliament could also be provided for in that. So that's one input I wanted to give. And another was that it's also difficult to think of an institution, a representative institution, without some form of election or a fair competition to become a part of that institution. So I know it's not easy to think of a way in which everyone could be given an equal opportunity to compete with each other, to be able to be a part of this institution and represent their communities. But I thought that this is also something which we should simultaneously think about, instead of perhaps, but along with creating an institution where we are inviting people who could be eminent personalities, intellectuals who can definitely add to the discussion, but also creating a platform which could be open to anyone who comes through a free and fair competition and becomes a part of that institution. So these two related concepts I thought that could also be included in the discussion. Thank you.
Someone else?
Just a quick, just a quick comment on Mansi's second point. I think that's a very important one about free and fair, whether it is necessarily a free and fair competition or there are other free and fair ways by which nominations and delegations take place, is something that needs to be discussed and could also be left to the self-defined. I mean, Quechua from Peru wants to nominate an elder through whatever processes that they have, rather than go into a competition, which is in some sense another sort of, for them, an alien way of doing things. Then it's something we have to respect. One could always emphasize and stress that this should not necessarily always be, sometimes it happens to always be an older man. So, you know, these are sort of principles one can build in over time, but it may not necessarily only be competition. Mansi, if that's something that I just wanted to add as a comment, because competitions can also become very hostile and problematic and divisive, as we know. So competitive electorals, politics can also become like that. So we'll have to figure out what's a good balance to make sure things are free and fair.
If I may, I think indeed that bicameral composition, in fact, allows us to move forward. Because if you have the council of the wisdoms of the people of the earth, that solves one of Ashish's questions, which is, we can have, yes, I mean, Nobel Prize winners and whatever, but I mean, from within the network, we can, of course, make sure that the fisher folk, that the indigenous communities, that others, that they, in fact, they go there and they have the capacity precisely to put those issues on the agenda. And my experience in the multi-convergence is exactly that those issues are so central because they are all the struggles we are, you know, here at the World Social Forum we are engaged in, which are questions of race, which are questions of ecology, which are questions of the indigenous population. And I think if we can, you know, as we said, just on an experimental basis, do it first, let's say, with various networks. I mean, Multiconvergência is strong in Latin America, also in Europe, the tapestry of it from India. Can we have a meeting where basically we put those things on the agenda and then we do it with something like, you know, we just try something like a Council of the Wise, perhaps with 50 people, just to see if that works. Then the other one is the second chamber, which would be ordinary people, basically representing, let's say, the whole of humanity in its richness. There's one document on the internet, and I'm going to show it to you, which does a really, really good job. I think if I can find how to do that, I think it's this one. Oh, you're seeing it? You know, it's from the, I'll give you the reference later, and it's just composition. You do recruitment by region. To avoid to have nation states, I mean, you design them in a different way. Then you go by criteria, world distribution, super regions. Then you have the gender, which is, you know, females are male 50, women 49. So you should have disparity. Then you go to the age criteria. I mean, this is the question as well. We just have to make sure that the whole thing is representative. The next issue is socioeconomic criteria. So the 1%, they would have just 1%. And we assume that the 90%, 99% would be represented as well. And given that within the 90%, the big majority is actually the poor and the lower middle classes, I mean, they would have their representation. They would be representing common people. And then the idea is that if you just take them by a random sample and bring them into discussion, that precisely, unlike professional politicians, I mean, they will really work through the issues and try to decide to the best of their knowledge and to the best of their principles, so that the decisions or that they will propose will represent the planetary community. So I think that works quite well. And then the question, in fact, is more how can we make sure that in those meetings, precisely that there is a spirit, in fact, of communication, of serving. How can we do that? And that, I think, is the whole operational question. So that's why our proposal to start with a little prototype, do a little experiment. How are we going to do that? Well, at first it has to be on a small scale. I mean, if we do it, let's say, with 50 people in the Council of the Wise, and we do it with, let's say, 70 ordinary people, I mean, can we learn something from it? And if it works, can we scale it up? I mean, that is in fact our proposal, and that is in fact the whole question. So on the one hand, having the principles right, and then in practice, in fact, seeing if we can just do it. I mean, it's wonderful to have, I think most of us are kind of academics and activists at the same time, but just imagine if we can do it where you have the fisher folk and the representative of the fisher folk and the representative of the indigenous populations coming together. Can we actually pull it off and do something which works nicely, smoothly, in which everybody is basically learning and serving the higher aim and the higher good? And that is the question.
I would like to comment on that. That it is it sounds really exciting, but then I'm also thinking about how many of the poorer sectors in my own country, and I think in many countries, are let's say leaning towards nationalism. And many of them, not all, but many. And to me, the explanation for that is that today, the nation state, the poor people can see that the nation state, if it wants enough, then it has the tools to, I don't know, print money, tax people that are richer, and basically provide healthcare, vaccinations, economic support, or even things like minimum wage taxes. For example, in the United States, they plan to give people $15 an hour as a minimum. And when you compare it to what people are earning outside, like in Mexico, I don't know, in India, so the gap is huge, and this is provided by the nation state, by its ability to tax and to regulate and to say that the people have rights and that there is a mechanism to take from the rich and give to the poor, basically. And Ashish asked, how can we convince people that they will get something from it? And I think that as long as it will stay in the realm of a talk shop where we can share ideas, I fear that it will not go far beyond what the World Social Forum has been in the last 20 years. I think that what we need to aspire to, what we need to demand, and what is that we will have a tool to tax the global corporations. Now they can move to register here and in Panama in a tax haven. Once we can tax the 1% and take their money and make a health service, a global health service, like in the UK, there is a NHS, National Health Service, and we can take, why not make it GHS, a global health service? There is enough money. But that, to tax, you have to have that inconvenient power of a government. I hate to support the power of government, but I see it working. The poor see it working. And I think that we need to tell ourselves, yes, there are good things, just as Ashish said, there are good things in the mechanism of the state. And we should, and the great thing is that we should apply it to the global level. Yes.
just quickly, because we will move to the other rooms, Tatiana, Ashish, and Alain, at the very end, at the last minute, when we have all the reports coming in, would you be willing to make a little statement of, what you have learned? Alain was not on program, but given that he's here now, can you speak just a minute, 2 minutes at the very end? And Tatiana is going to speak, Ashish, representing both the meta networks, and Alain, if you want to speak as well, just 1 or 2 minutes, just to close. Can I count you in?
Just one word. Let us go on. Let us proceed.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think by now, in 20 seconds or something like that, the program will be interrupted, and we are going back to the plenary, where Teresa is going to speak in the name of us and basically give a summary of the discussions we had. Okay.
Thank you, Frederick.
Well, thank you very much. It did work, and we will see it in the other sessions if it worked as well. Here we go. So we see each other in the plenary. Mm-hmm. Sometime, I think probably 20, 25, 30 minutes. And then we can have a global discussion if we still have time. But I think actually looking at the clock, time is relatively scarce, and I would suggest, in fact, that we try to limit time, but I don't want to decide, autocratically, but probably, I don't know, 1:30, we really have to finish. Is that okay? Is that too late? Okay, so let's try to go for 1:30. If we can finish earlier, that's best. Let us now invite people from the different language areas to report from the discussions. So I will start with perhaps the Portuguese group. O relator, por favor, do grupo luso. Quem foi?
Desculpe, Frederic.
Então, bom dia. Bom dia a todas e todos. Eu vou fazer, então...
Cláudia, um minutinho.
Isso, Cláudia. O Ashish está falando que ele deve ir embora em 10 minutos. Só quero dizer que a gente talvez poderia despedir ele. Só por isso que eu queria fazer o comentário.
Tá bom. Foi Ashish que você disse? Desculpa, não...
Ashish colocou...
Oh, yes,
Thank
right.
you. I'm so sorry. There is another session at the World Social Forum, which I'm scheduled to be in another 10 minutes. So my apologies for that. I think, this has been a very exciting and interesting discussion. I think there's a lot of things that still need to be worked out as obviously in such an ambitious proposal. I'm sure the networks that are getting together in the other forums, on the other assemblies, would certainly like to continue collaboration on this to see how we can work together. The 2 points I made in the English speaking room, which I think are really crucial, is one is the importance of building trust without ensuring that there is trust in the different global networks, regional networks, local communities, and so on. This kind of ambitious attempt will not succeed. It will collapse, and this is very important. And the second is to build an idea of significance, that the fact that something like this is very important for me wherever I am, for my struggles, that it can contribute to my struggles, but then I can also contribute at a global level. So these two things of trust and significance, or trust and meaning, I think are very, very important. How do we take those forward? Just to end by saying that please do, if some of you can represent this initiative on the 30th at the Global Assemblies. I've put the links in the chat message. That would help to take it that much further and build relationships amongst other global processes and this one. So that's all, just some quick remarks. Thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ashish. See you soon. So I now pass the word to Claudia, please.
Então, bom dia a todos e todas, quase boa tarde, né? Eu vou fazer aqui brevemente a relatoria da sala em português e vou fazer, então, das 3 perguntas em um só, digamos assim. Então, acho que um ponto que ficou muito claro para nós é a questão da representação que discutimos ao longo dessa manhã e como fazer essa representação, né? E não que falemos pelos outros, mas sim que eles falem por si, né? Através das suas causas, através do seu chão, através das suas realidades. Então, é preciso expandir as redes que já fazemos parte. Então, se hoje somos 13, que futuramente sejamos inúmeras redes e que cada rede busque essas demais redes. E redes que estão surgindo com novas bandeiras, com novas lutas, né? E para além dos critérios como racial, desigualdade, a gente no grupo discutiu também critérios como escolaridade, então que seja representados todos os anos, todas as escolaridades possíveis. Outro critério de faixas etárias também, que abranja todas as pessoas nas mais diversas idades e que seja do campo e da cidade. E aí, como operacionalizar tudo isso, né? Então, uma proposta seria através das tecnologias, que façamos mais uso delas a partir de seus aplicativos de tomada de decisão, coisas que já existem atualmente. Outro conceito que a gente discutiu um pouco também é o conceito da organização de centro difuso. Então, que não tenhamos mais dirigentes fixos, mas que cada um vai liderando a partir da sua capacidade, a partir da sua aptidão. Então, numa metodologia, digamos, de sociocracia, sem que necessitamos de uma votação da maioria, porque, de fato, nem sempre a maioria representa o todo, né? Então, se tem ali um grupo hegemônico, de fato, ali a gente não pode falar que foi uma tomada de decisão democrática. E um pouco sobre a terceira questão, que são as premissas. De fato, elas são premissas, né? Mas como conseguir garantir que se tem uma governança assim? Então, a gente precisa pensar em alguns protocolos para isso, e a gente pontuou alguns mecanismos, que seria a comunicação não violenta e valores para a cultura de paz. E, nesse sentido, a gente trouxe muito o conceito da cultura do encontro do Papa Francisco também. Então, resumidamente, é um pouco isso que a gente conversou na sala. Obrigada.
Obrigado, Cláudia. Agora eu vou passar a palavra ao grupo francófono e acho que é Débora que é a relatora. Correto?
Por favor, me deixem para o fim, porque eu vou falar em português e anotei em francês. Eu estou organizando. Passe para outro, por favor.
Tudo bem. Então, vamos passar para o grupo espanhol. Acho que é Michele que faz a relatora. Michele.
Olá. Estão me ouvindo?
Sim, mas não estou ouvindo.
Bom,
forte.
Sim. Do grupo espanhol participamos 9 pessoas, do Brasil, Equador, Colômbia, Peru e Argentina. Fizemos uma introdução sobre as propostas de acordo com as palavras iniciais também, e chegamos a um consenso de que sim, todos e todas nós concordamos com a proposta de criarmos um parlamento global, né? Essa foi o nosso ponto de partida. Em seguida, discutimos que para construí-lo de uma forma real, né, de uma forma concreta, precisamos ter em mente que temos que construir, né, elementos institucionais, estruturais, temáticos, né? E aí nós passamos a discutir como seria esse procedimento, né? Também estamos de acordo em fazermos esse ensaio, né? De realmente construir. Estamos dispostos e dispostas a fazer esse ensaio, né? Então, alguns temas, para além dos que já estão propostos, né, como os temas ambientais, raciais, de gênero, né? Apareceu temas que foram silenciados, como foi dito inicialmente, né? Como a questão da vacina, da Covid-19, por exemplo, né, suas patentes e tudo mais. Então, outros temas também devem surgir a partir daí. Uma outra questão que foi levantada em nosso grupo é em relação à questão da representatividade, né, das populações do mundo. Então, que as 13 redes que já compõem, né, e as que venham a compor, né, nós discutimos essa questão de que a gente, até no sul geográfico, nós encontremos o sul global, né, para que as questões que foram colocadas da exclusão de outros povos, outras ideias, né, elas estejam incluídas nas redes que já estão e nas que venham a ser incluídas. Por fim, a gente também falou sobre a questão das lideranças, que sejam lideranças de impacto, que nós possamos aprender necessariamente com, por exemplo, as comunidades andinas, né, e suas experiências locais, e trabalhar com aquelas pessoas que estejam dispostas a construir a democracia desde a base, né, realmente assim, de baixo para cima. Então, foram essas, eu não sei se Marcos quer complementar.
Marcos, se você quer complementar?
Quero sim. Obrigado, Michele. Só para esclarecer um pouco a questão do Sul global e do Norte global, é muito importante. Trata-se de um conceito não geográfico, como é o Sul e o Norte, mas é um conceito sociológico que tem a ver com a classes pelo capitalismo a nível global. Então, quando a gente diz sul global, nós estamos incluindo todos os povos oprimidos do mundo, do planeta, que incluem os indígenas, os quilombolas e trabalhadores, todo mundo que vive do seu trabalho e não de rendas do capital. E o outro lado é o lado dos opressores, não é? Que é o norte global, que está no Brasil, está em qualquer país pobre também, né? O norte global.
Très bien. Maintenant, on peut peut-être passer à la question de la salle francophone. Débora,
ok, vou tentar. Nossa discussão foi muito rica. Começamos, então, sobre como afrontar a angústia da urgência e a necessidade da serenidade. Isso nos levou a tratar a questão das emoções e do perigo que são emoções manipuladas, que é exatamente o que estamos vivendo no mundo atualmente. Portanto, há um apelo ao crescimento da nossa inteligência emocional, ou da nossa racionalidade afetiva. Isso foi tocado diante de todas as perguntas. Nós podemos contar, por exemplo, com o serviço dos artistas, que são aqueles que lidam com a emoção e ajudam a que a gente possa crescer em maturidade diante das nossas emoções. Mas, certamente, essa complexidade de enfrentar a urgência, mas segurando a nossa angústia e andando com serenidade, é um desafio das redes para que a gente possa construir a confiança entre nós, e é um desafio de cada pessoa, que ela precisa dar suas emoções, gerir seu ego, gerir suas angústias. Sinto muito de ser tão sucinta diante de uma discussão tão rica. Sobre a segunda questão da legitimidade do parlamento, né, de uma representatividade real, como construir uma representatividade real, foi trazido o conceito, a ideia de que uma representatividade num mundo tão diverso é realmente algo impossível de conseguir, porque a cada vez mais as subjetividades são reconhecidas e, portanto, existe uma renovação das tribos. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, nós precisamos perseguir essa representatividade perseguir esses critérios que possam representar, de fato, uma grande parte da humanidade. Mas sabendo que uma real representatividade é impossível, dada a diversidade humana. Portanto, buscar aquilo que nos une. E foi dado um exemplo muito interessante de que, em uma assembleia, em um movimento onde houve critérios de espécie de cotas de representação, mas as pessoas foram chamadas a falar não dos seus assuntos específicos, e sim do assunto de outros. Por exemplo, uma mulher que não está falando das questões do feminino, mas está falando das Sobre a terceira questão da liderança de serviço, novamente vem a questão da emoção, uma liderança onde a racionalidade e a afetividade estejam juntas, uma liderança exercida a partir de uma inteligência emocional. Mas como não deixar que as emoções, a afetividade, por exemplo, tomem a cena e com isso seja muito mais facilmente manipulada? Foi trazida uma proposta da ideia da reversibilidade, de que as pessoas possam, de que as experiências possibilitem que as pessoas saiam do seu lugar. Então, sair do lugar de doador para ir para o lugar de quem recebe, sair do lugar do racional para ir para o lugar do afetivo e vice-versa. E essa reversibilidade iria nos ajudar a enfrentar essa complexidade da proposta que a gente está querendo construir. Ela não pode ser fixa, ela deve ter uma maior leveza, ela não pode ser burocratizada, ela precisa ser vivida de uma forma evolutiva. Então, os critérios, por exemplo, precisam ser constantemente mudados. As pessoas precisam estar em rotatividade constante para que não se fixe uma experiência que, se for muito fixada do parlamento, da representação, da liderança de serviço, ela vai perder a sua leveza e, portanto, se burocratizar. Então, que a gente consiga juntar, sabendo da dificuldade de juntar o afetivo e o racional, o curto e o longo prazo, e, com isso, de fato, possamos ter uma experiência de Parlamento da Cidadania Planetária que seja um processo de aprendizagem. Obrigada. Se alguém quiser do grupo complementar, por favor, ajude.
Desculpe, Frederica, antes de continuar, talvez alguém pode traduzir para o francês. Bom, imagino que está traduzindo o pessoal. A Genevieve está falando para mim que Felipe Yaú saiu da sala e não consegue entrar de novo. Por favor, Genevieve, fala para ele tentar de novo daqui uns minutos, agora mesmo, porque nós tínhamos bloqueado a sala por causa dos hackers. Fala para él ingresar con su nombre.
Yo ya hablé con él y me dijo que se va a otra reunión que empieza ahora, así que no se preocupen.
Pronto podemos continuar. Disculpe, disculpe, o mestre de cerimônia.
Okay, so if no compliments to the French summary, I will now ask Teresa to relate, to bring back to us a summary of the discussions we had in the Anglophone room.
Okay, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, so we had a group of 10 people from Brazil, from Latin America, from Europe, from Asia, which was very rich. We started with a small presentation of each other, and Frederic shared with us the 3 questions that we would discuss. And later we went through all of this, and I will report this summary where the main issue that appeared was what makes us representative of this parliament. This was something that went through all the comments. The parliament will be bicameral. The way to treat this parliament will help us to solve some of these issues. It will be made of people that will be brought by the networks, but also by percentual, considering indexes that are known like cultural, gender, and income that we can share later. Dignity instead of charity was an issue that was brought that needs to be addressed, like sacred economy, spiritual components, and reciprocity to combat communism in these topics that we need to take care in this parliament. Inclusivity is needed to be built. 3 items was highlighted by Ashish. That is inclusivity, trust, mainly interculturally speaking, to have a sense of significance also, to build conversations, dialogues. The ideas are not ready, we need to develop them. 1 third point was, again, which collectives are we talking about? What would we consider? Geographic considerations, cultural, maybe trade unions. All these themes need to be developed to have trust and meaning in this process. Also, somebody asked that maybe why wouldn't we use, for example, the party mechanisms? Also, we should create a platform in order to be representative of this variety. We need to keep also the idea that this process needs to be free and fair, to have fair competition and not to have an hostile process. This bicameral solution should help us to structure in this just way of taking care of these issues. This chamber, the citizen chamber will be composed by percentual, considering this gender, percentual income and cultural characteristics. And also we had a suggestion considering the idea of a tax that would get an income from 1% of the society to reinforce global health. So please, Frederick, if you want to add some comments.
I think you did a very good job in summarizing and evocating the wealth of the discussions, not only in our room, but also in the other rooms. I mean, this procedure of splitting up usually is technically a little bit difficult, but when it works, I mean, it really is a process that has been quite successful. So now that we had all the summaries, we can move towards the end. We have had and we have seen that the common humanity in its unity and diversity is at the same time a presupposition of everything we do. But this common humanity has also be represented. That means it has to be made visible, and it has to be made present. And of course, once with this
Disculpe, Frederic, por favor, ao tradutor do inglês, do português. O português está sendo escutado no canal do inglês e o inglês está sendo escutado no canal do português. Alguma coisa mudou no caminho. Obrigada. Desculpe, Frederic.
Nada, imagina. I was saying that common humanity is, of course, is a presupposition of everything we do, but we need a global citizens' parliament in the middle, actually, to make this unity and diversity of our humanity visible and present, so that, in fact, the project of realizing this common humanity so that it can act with will and consciousness, that is exactly the whole project. So we are now coming at the end. I think the next step will be to try to realize in miniature, within the networks, kind of a miniature version of this parliament. We don't know yet how exactly it's going to work. Perhaps we can start indeed with the two chambers, with the chamber, let's say, the Council of the Wisdoms, which would have this possibility, in fact, to present, let's say, all the themes and to take up this theme that what Ashi said, that the subaltern, the community of the fishers, that also the indigenous populations, that they have their place there. I think that would be the role of the Council of the Wisdoms of the peoples of the earth, perhaps also with important figures, perhaps Nobel Prizes, whatever, but that we have to figure out within the groups. And then I think we also have to test, in fact, how we can take ordinary people, how we can select them, and how we can implement and start this kind of discussions and deliberations, of course, in the hope that just, that we can test the process, the procedure. And if that works, then perhaps we can scale up. But we are now coming at the end. And I will ask at the same time, I asked Ashish, but given that he had to leave, he spoke before leaving. I will now ask Tatiana to speak in the name of the global, the Multiconvergência, and also Alain Caillé, because the discussions within the Convivialist International, I mean, were in fact very much inspired by a proposal that he put on the table. So to finish, perhaps first Alain, and then Tatiana can speak in the name of our network. And I mean, I'm not going to say in the name of humanity, but I mean, she can at least speak in the name of our network. So Alain, just the last words. Je t'en prie.
Frédéric, tu veux que je dise quelques mots?
Si tu veux bien.
Non. Bien que dire, sinon que moi je suis très très content de voir que cette idée nous rassemble. Et manifestement, nous y croyons. Nous ne savons pas du tout comment ça peut marcher. Il y a des dizaines, des centaines de questions qui se posent. Mais nous avons appris à nous connaître. Commençons à nous connaître un petit peu. Nous faisons. Et nous savons que...
Perdón, una vez más. Al traductor de portugués, se está escuchando el portugués en el canal de francés. Si lo puedes corregir, gracias. Excusez-moi, Alain.
Non, il faut que je recommence ou...
Non, il faut que tu continues.
Je continue. Bon. De toute façon, il faut que nous continuions.
Bom, nós temos que continuar. O canal estava errado aqui. Nós sabemos aqui que essa ideia é muito importante, essa ideia de fazer emergir em algum lugar, a consciência moral da humanidade. Quem sou eu para representar e para dizer alguma coisa? Quem somos nós? Nós não sabemos muito, mas nós compartilhamos essa ideia e nós temos que tentar realizá-la, e eu acho que nós vamos conseguir.
In English or in Portuguese, but we'll find out soon. Those are the final words.
Thank you, Frederick. I'll speak in English as I prepared my speech in English. So just to say that, may the spirit of unity be the force of change which breaks through with the hegemonic socio-economic model. May generosity co-emerge respect, responsibility, and increasingly intelligent participation, aligned to the construction of planetary citizenship with development interface of the environment, biodiversity policy, and alternatives. By sharing knowledge of multi-convergence of global networks with the knowledge of Ashish, we envision overcoming global inequalities and building a path of governance and peace. So we continue together of this journey, building a planetary citizenship, and thank you.
Thank you very much. So another world is possible, another humanity is already real and actual, and now we are going to take leave of everybody, but thanking the translators who did a terrific job, thanking also Alicia, who was turning the buttons and making it all possible, and of course thanking to all of you for being present. So thank you very much, absolutely wonderful, and I hope to see you again soon, somewhere, sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you, Frederick.
Oh. Thank you, nice.
Thank you, interpreters. Thank you.
Frederick.
Obrigada, interpreters.
Obrigada.
Obrigada, Frederic, todo mundo.
The struggle for life continues. La lucha por la vida sigue.
Abraços e beijos para todos. Até a próxima vez. Au revoir, à bientôt, cher ami. À bientôt.
À bientôt, au revoir, merci. Goodbye. Obrigada, tchau.
Take care, be safe.
Tchau, gente. Obrigada. Foi ótimo.
Obrigada, Michele. Um abraço.
Mais tarde eu mando um e-mail com o resumo sistematizado, tá bom?
Isso é muito importante.
Da parte do espanhol, tá?
Report. Os relatórios de grupo passar para a Tereza, que é a nossa, faz tudo aqui.
Tá ok, eu passo logo mais.
Até o final do dia eu passo também a de português. Foi ótimo, gente. Um prazer. Tchau, tchau.
Muito obrigada, gente. Um prazer conhecer todos. Continuamos.
Obrigado, intérpretes.
Obrigada.
Os intérpretes agradecem também. Mas a gente só está no...
Morgana.
The interpretation.
Merci pour les ouvertures interprètes. Merci a vous.
Gracias. Gracias. Aquí están todos os intérpretes, podem aparecer se quiserem ligar as câmeras.
É boa ideia.
Muito obrigada, Alicia. Obrigada a vocês.
Obrigada.
Gracias a todos.
Gratidão.
Gracias.
Tamo junto.
Estamos juntos.
José, estamos juntos siempre.
Por favor,
hasta el final.
Gracias, gracias. Tradutores, deixem os e-mails de vocês para vocês receberem o material da multiconvergência por e-mail.
Eu já deixei, já recebi. Eu recebi ontem já. Eu deixei na primeira.
Eu coloquei agora o meu também.
Eu já estou...
Salete, que bom te ver, Salete, mais uma vez.
Tudo bom? Gente, amanhã, 20 horas.
Sim.
Eu não.
Eu vou estar. Eu devo estar.
Beleza.
Eu vou tentar
resolver. Um colega.
Não, eu não.
Vai ter um colega que vai...
Vai ser o Pascal e eu vamos estar no francês.
Eu e Martina vamos estar no inglês.
Fantástico. Lindo. Maravilha, obrigada. Gente, a multiconvergência se encontra dia 4 de fevereiro, não é isso?
Não era
4 de fevereiro às 9 da manhã.
Não, como 4 de fevereiro? Era 1º de fevereiro.
Desculpa. Que dia é primeiro?
É segunda-feira.
Segunda-feira.
Às 9 horas. Aí a gente faz uma avaliação e continua. Um abraço, Frederico.
Débora, eu coloquei
um abraço a todo mundo.
Reunião até às 9.
Tá bom.
Tem que ser 9h30, 9h30.
9h30, ok, Marcos.
Bom, 9h30.
Segunda, 9h30.
Obrigada a todos.
Tchau.
Tchau.
Foi maravilhoso. Obrigada.
Tá. Obrigada, Clara.